Hello, my name is Marta. Welcome to this introductory video of the video series on field methods in remote sensing. The objective of this video series is to reflect on the need of field work in remote sensing. We will discuss aspects as when this work needs to be done, why and how. Measurements methods, particularly for vegetation, vary widely. So in this course, we will learn about the main techniques, tools and protocols for obtaining information on the ground. We will then test these techniques in the field and analyze the data on the laboratory. The ultimately objective is to provide you with basic practical knowledge about methods of project development in remote sensing with a fieldwork component. To achieve this, I have organized the course as follows. The first 2 points will be presented via this video series that you should listen prior our physical session on the 27th of June, when we will have half-day trip to the Black Mountain. And after the field trip, we will return to the laboratory around 1, have a little break for lunch, and then we will have a lab session during the afternoon to process the samples we have collected on the field, and also another short session the day after to finalize the data post-processing. You will also need to spend some extra time to analyze and submit your report for this specific activity of the course. As you may all know, remote sensing means sensing things from the distance, and this can be done with a wide range of sensors and platforms. The discussion of field procedures in this part of the course will mainly be focused on the needs of remote sensing projects that use sensors in the visible range of the spectra. Most of the things discussed here will probably apply to other remote sensing sensors in other wavelengths, such as thermal, infrared, or microwave. But in most of the cases, other considerations may need to be considered, and we will now discuss those considerations in this course. So during this course, I will be assuming that you have a basic knowledge of remote sensing. So if you don't have it or you need a reminding, I strongly recommend you to watch some videos that I have pointed out in the outline of the course. And those videos belong to the course on advanced remote sensing and GIS. Finally, I strongly recommend you to read this short book on field methods in remote sensing by Roger McCoy, as I have followed that book and it will give you more extra examples and explanations. So let's get started with this beautiful satellite image. So one of the applications of remote sensing is the classification of vegetation via visual interpretation of aerial photographs or satellite images. So the recognizing targets is the key to interpretation and information extraction. So you observe the differences between targets and their backgrounds, and you compare different targets based on any or all of the visual elements of the image, like tone, shape, size, pattern, texture, shadows, or association. So, for example, would you know what this in this image is based on these different elements? Can you have a guess? So this is a fruit tree orchard in Spain. So sometimes it's very hard to interpret what it is. So in most of the cases, you need to inspect the area to get a clear picture of what it is in there. And that's why in this specific example, fieldwork is needed to better clarify what it is. And also, if you have classified the image, you will need to go and check if you have done a good job. So So even though we know that fieldwork is important for many applications of remote sensing, there are many other questions that we should ask ourselves. For example, is the information we handle reliable? Which is the reliability of our results? Can the knowledge of the terrain facilitate the analysis and interpretation of the data? The answer of all these questions are yes, but does it compensate? We have to bear in mind that fieldwork is very expensive in economic terms and in time. So fieldwork should only be carried out when strictly essential. And we should always have a careful planification of the fieldwork to minimize the cost. So this course will give you some guidance on how to effectively plan fieldwork. However, before going into detail about planning fieldwork, I would like to further reflect on the need of fieldwork. As I have previously mentioned, remote sensing is the science of obtaining information about objects or areas from the distance, typically from an aircraft or a satellite, or also with handheld devices, as we will see on our field trip. However, sensors don't directly provide the information we may need. For example, we may need to know how much carbon the plants capture, or how much water a crop needs, or we may have been asked to track sediment transport in a river. So whatever the final application is, we need to convert the data collected by the sensor into useful information. And this can be typically done using two different approaches. So on one hand, we can use physical deductive models where the behavior of a system is deduced from the application of natural laws expressed in a model of the system. Such models are built based on an understanding of the physical processes underlying the system in question. But on the other hand, we have empirical based models that represent theories derived from the observed data. So whatever the model you use, again, your objective is to convert the data collected by the sensor to continuous of nominal spatialized variables. And to do this, you will always need field data for calibration or for validation. So let's talk a bit more about empirical models. These models are the most common used in remote sensing. And these models can determine whether a statistical relationship exists between the data and the target variable, but they will never tell you why this relationship exists. There are typically two different target variables that these models target. One of the biophysical variables and others are hybrid, that are determined for at least one non-biophysical variable like land use. Here I list some of the most common biophysical variables used in remote sensing products, like chlorophyll, moisture content of vegetation, temperature, typically for fire detection, or water stress in vegetation, several things from the atmosphere, evapotranspiration, and many others. So all these variables affect the signal captured by the sensor. This is typically called a spectral response. So every different vegetation type or land cover type have a different spectral response, and this is the basic of using remote sensing to estimate any physical variable. For example, here I show you just as a refresher the spectral response of vegetation. Healthy vegetation, and that is in green here, has a significant minimum in reflectance in the visible portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, resulting from the pigments that absorbs the energy that arrives to the leaf surface. Reflectance increases dramatically in the near infrared. However, stressed vegetation can also be detected because this vegetation has a significantly lower reflectance in the infrared, as you can see here. This slide shows you the typical steps to calibrate an empirical model using remote sensing data. So first of all, you'll need to do some field samplings to recognize the area and to use the data for the calibration, as we mentioned previously. So the objective here is to gather information from the variable of interest. For example, as we will do in the field work, we may go and to collect some samples to determine the live fuel moisture content or the vegetation content, moisture content. The second step is to analyze the images to get the reflectance from those images or vegetation indices or whatever variable you want to relate to your target variable. Then you will need to analyze the data to find the empirical relationship between the values of the image and those taken in the field. Finally, next you will need to apply the model to the whole image, and then you will need to validate that model. And therefore, the field work is needed here in two main steps, in the calibration step and in the validation step. Here, for example, I show you as an example the temporal trend of vegetation moisture content or fuel moisture content observed and estimating by two different models, one empirical model in red and one physical model in green. And in blue, you can see the data that was measured on the field for the different dates of the year. So this is very important because you can see how well your model does. You can see, for example, here that the simulating models highly underestimate the value, whereas here the empirical model highly overestimates. So this is the use we do of the field data when it comes to remote sensing models. This is it for this short video. You are welcome to click on the next video where I will focus on the physical models and I will wrap up the introduction.